Dun, 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 dun. Hello and
I don't even know
welcome
how to
for being
address that.
here. And I don't even know what's going on this morning. What I do know is that my Wi-Fi keeps freezing on me. It may drop out because of the storm we're having. In which case, enjoy the Jaymi show.
Oh my goodness.
You'll be
Yes.
the jam without the burr.
Yep. I get to be the jam. Jam. Hey, Drew. Good morning. Thanks for showing up for a little bit, everybody. We're happy to have you all here on this Pacific Northwest, very wet Monday.
Very wet, very windy.
Yes. Well, not windy down where I am, but it's one of those awesome winter days that kind of dovetails to me perfectly into what we're going to be talking about today, because it's all about going within.
It does want to make you stay inside and be cozy. And what better thing to do than be like casting some runes, right? Doing some divination.
Heck yeah.
So what the little journey that we're taking you on today is that it's kind of the beginning of this journey for Jaymi and myself, where we're looking at the runes from the divine feminine perspective and from an earth mother perspective. Yes. And before the show, Jaymi and I were talking about how that this approach has reawakened our interest in the runes, and we're both finding that we're actually creating a connection with them at a level that we hadn't before.
Yes.
And it's because it's not that neither of us, we both have runes and rune decks around that we have used, and Jaymi wrote the Runic Tarot, and
I also wrote a rune deck, the Northern Lights deck. I think it was. It's over on the shelf, but I'm not going to get up and grab it.
So runes are part of our divinatory toolbox in our realm, but just not something that I completely connected with. Agreed. And I'm so grateful to have a new perspective that is helping me do that. How about you?
Exactly. So my rune experience kind of started with tarot, amazingly enough, where back my first actual working deck, everybody kind of knows that my first tarot was the Witches Tarot from US Games, the one that was shown in the James Bond movie, which I didn't, connect those dots. I just liked the images, and it was what my B. Dalton had. Yeah. Remember B. Dalton, kids? But my second deck was the Handel Tarot. And as you can see on the cover, we've got runes appearing. So here's, one of them, etc. And the number 12 in the deck shows Odin as the hanged one, or the hanged man, as he hung from the world tree, Yggdrasil. So that's my first thing. And what's funny is that Rachel Pollack did go and spend a month with Herman Handel to write these fantastic companion books. So that was my first bit of the runes. Right as COVID hit, though, because I had sets, I had been dabbling with the imagery. One of my signature bind runes came from the Handel. I combined the Universe card and the Magician card together, and that's kind of like my magical signature, type of a sigil. And a friend of mine, Anna Alexander, she's great. She's done amazing. I taught her tarot, and in return, I took a class with her and 2 others locally here in 2020 to actually learn the runes. Now, at the time, we were reading Diane Paxton's big book on runes. However, when I went through it and I keened the runes and learned about them and tried to implement or, think about how they were present every week in my life, for I think we studied, it was a two classes a month thing, and then it was all online because of the, because of the early pandemic days. I didn't really connect divinatory with them. I connected more with them as a language and as a bind rune technique, which all that information helped me because that's when the runic tarot came out. And so I was using my information of the Elder Futhark, the Lesser Futhark, and the Anglo-Saxon sets, because if you look at the runic tarot, there's a lot of that in there. So I had to kind of jump around, and there are bind runes in the court cards. So I also had to kind of figure out, because I didn't get a lot of the information, I created, hopefully with intent to the card's meaning and to the artist Jack Sephiroth's meanings of what that bind rune could be interpreted as, amongst some other things. So after that, though, I didn't really, again, use them as much. I did a little sigil work with them because, again, I saw them more as a language until we started reading this baby.
Yeah.
The Goddess Casts the Runes. This book, and it's really slim, but don't let that fool you. This book packs a punch, a serious punch, because this really opened up my eyes. And again, I read Diana Paxton's big ass, pardon my French, book that you could use as a doorstop. And since then, she has fallen from grace. So I know a lot of instructors and everybody are looking for better science or better, a rune poem interpretations, because, Paxton is not good. So I don't recommend that book. If you want, more of an Asatru or the Nordic religious, early religion ways, there are other places to find. But what I love about this is that this goes even further back, because a lot of the source, about the material talks about the Vavel, the women mystics. We hear a lot about Odin and the gods. The runes, were named after, two of them, Tyr's set, Hela, and then can't remember, I guess Odin's set.
Odin's, yeah.
Yeah. And so 24 runes with 3/8 or etir, total. So it's 3 times 8. But that's, that takes us back, what, 6,000 years or so in runic, what the existing runic lore. So, but we know that they're older. These symbols are way older, especially if you look at linguistic wise, how they're written in straight lines. There's no curves. And that's because of using sticks or, stone to grind out things. It's really hard using primitive tools to make curves. You need clay or other, supple, bendable things to actually make the curves.
Right. And it's not that this book is overly scholarly.
No, it's not.
But what it does, it just in a very approachable manner combines history, myth, and ecofeminism, and it just creates this modern understanding of the runes and honors the ancestral roots of the runic system. And that is something I think is beautiful. Anu approaches each rune as them carrying or being like a living archetype that reflects a certain aspect of our human experience. And the way that she brings that to light through an earth-centered spirituality is, I think, one of the things that was helping me connect with the runes at a different level now.
What I loved is, as I'm kind of flipping a little bit through each 8, it's she ties it back into the maiden, mother, and crone archetypes that we have. And because I wrote, the triple goddess, my world card in the triple goddess tarot by Lo Scarabeo with artwork by Ricardo Manelli, or Franco Manelli, sorry, Franco, I used kind of the idea of the norns, the wheel, that idea of weaving, of fate, to, be more of an expression. And that's, weaving has always been quote unquote women's work. Gathering the wool, the fur, the stuff, measuring it out straight, get it. If you think about like the drop spindles, that's how a lot of people used to do it before we had the spinning wheels. And the Norns are the ones that had this magic to spin our fate, to spin our word. And so, all these stories and poems and things like that are how I've mostly been seeing the runes. The history, the folklore behind it, the anthropology aspect of it. So to me, it still is a living language. It's a unknown living language. But yes, Anu, and there's some things about Anu's book. Number one, I don't think she did not write this on a computer. I think she hand wrote this on paper, and then because of her practice of being off grid, she gave it to somebody who could translate it, or type it into a computerized format. So that tells you something about how, she lives. She has that connection to the land, to these runes. She sees them as a spiritual creature. They are living objects. And I think that's also mentioned in the other book that we ended up reading, which I only have the e-copy, so this is kind of the cover. There we go. Here. Yep. Awesome. The Wild Soul Runes, Reawakening the Ancestral Feminine. And again, all this stuff will be linked below. But whereas, this book gives you that history, that connection, and the references back to everything, and it also questions, like, this whole chapter on the theft of the runes talks about how Odin did steal the runes. He hung himself from the world tree for 9 days, or for 9 nights. What's the number 9 also represent? Class? Nope.
Gestation, class.
Yeah, it's a gestation number. It takes nine months to birth a baby. So in a way, and Anu talks about how he gave birth to himself to kind of realize and pick up the runes on the ground that he saw that were already there, that were fruit from the trees.
Right. And what I appreciate about both of those books is that they don't dismiss the patriarchal interpretation of the runes by any means. They're just expanding the possibility, right? Expanding the knowledge and accessibility of the runes, which is very important these days. So this is, in Wild Soul Runes, Lara Vesta talks about, reflecting on ancestral, excuse me, because my thing keeps freezing, ancestral fears. And it goes through what the litany of ancestral emotions could be. So it could be fear and shame and rage and pain, and how you can take these runes and access those and heal them, put healing into those times. So for people who like doing that level of ancestral work, or even for those people who maybe are starting out on their personal shadow work practices, this is definitely a tool to lean into for those.
Yes.
Because she does. Well, I do wish that there was more body to Wild Soul. She has fantastic journal prompt questions, and some addresses some practical rituals that you can embody within those creative prompts, so that you can make the act of casting runes more sacramental than just intellectual.
And more you can also embody it back into yourself. So this book is good for the meanings and connecting it back into the goddess. and how each one also tells you how it might answer the question. Wild Soul Runes, imagine the cover here because it's my ebook, has a system where you can do a rune a week. And like Amber said, those questions are amazing. There's like a page and a half or so, or at least on the ebook, it looks like a page and a half of questions for each rune that you can ask it, that you can dialogue with it, that you can, begin to understand. And then it goes into the page she's showing now of the inquiry. Like she's got 3 to 4 different runic poems, and she has the original old languages, the Old Norse, Anglo-Saxon, Old English, Nordic, et cetera, et cetera. And with those poems, you can kind of see, and her translations, you can see how throughout the years they've, been changed or worked on. And the same goes for Anu's book, where in some cases she'll actually talk about her translations of all the poems and everything into it. So it's kind of nice to have these 2 different source materials where Laura is coming at it from a scholarly point of view. She does, and a personalized point of view. She does talk about unverified personal gnosis, which is huge. However, and something I've been, people will accuse you of saying, well, this is all unverified personal gnosis. But the thing is, this divination is a conversation between you and the divine. So it's a one-to-one discussion with you and the tool that, you have, whether it's runic cards or the symbols that you print somewhere or dice, and the knowing inside you or the knowing above you, being around you in this world. And that's all UPG. That's all unverified personal gnosis. However, a lot of my Tarot Inspired Life book were the experiments I did with the cards. But what these ladies are telling you is play with this material. See how it comes from. See how it connects back into the flow of the information we know. Where Laura talks about, how for millennia, women, the matriarch society was originally how we grouped people together, because babies being born, the magic of birth, the magic of, women and bleeding, guys didn't have that. But at some point, something switched, whether it was, we all attribute it mostly to the Abrahamic, Christianity coming through, or other patriarch, societies where they, you can almost say, like, during times of crisis, since women were the tenders, men were the more warriors. At some points, they talk about how that had to come out, and they would readjust their myths and their religions in a way, and the stories to align with the more, warish times. It's just that's, as that power grew, we've been stuck for
still have copy?
A while. So, yeah. But, just the ideas in these books, like the idea of runes as ancestors, the rune as a living being,
Right.
the runes as teachers. These are, you can almost look at it in a weird way as biblical, because they have messages, they have lessons they're teaching us. They're fairy tales, they're folklore. These 24 symbols helped people identify gifts, talents, warnings. Like Anu talks about the second 8 in this book being, and that's AITTE. I can't remember the spelling, but she talks about the mother's set in this book as kind of like warnings and guidance, kind of like how we're told, don't put your hand on the stove because it's hot and you will burn yourself. And of course, every point in at least in my own life, you got to test it, because that's how we are, But yeah, it's this body of coolness that we can now, take into our dice or our, wooden sets and apply them, or the wooden, or like I've got a metal set. I've even got, and we'll talk about this soon, but cards,
Right, or cards.
Yeah. Again, there's so many ways that you can get in touch with the runes and casting them and understanding their language and wisdom.
One of my favorite things to do when I'm out walking is I'll look up, especially now, right in the fall and the winter where so many of the leaves have come back down,
Mm-hmm.
is just looking up random tree and seeing what rune shapes pop out of the branches for me. So it's like that walking meditation. Yeah.
I love that. I didn't think about that, but I'm looking at the branches out now from a window that's just beyond my monitor. And I can see some of the runic shapes. And what's even cooler is that the Nordic folk, as well as Celtic, if you think about that, Anglo-Saxon, if you will, did tie a lot of symbols back into trees. Or especially with runes, they would use antlers from, the cattle and the reindeer, or trees, certain trees like birch, to, actually inscribe those symbols on it.
Yeah. But in talking about card decks, there's two that I've been working with in preparing for this. And there's definitely, out of the two, there's one that I'm definitely more, that I actually prefer over the other. And I'll show you the two. The first one is the Norse Goddess Rune Oracle.
We can see it.
Yep, that is by Rebecca Stark, and the artwork was by Sharon McLeod. The artwork is lovely. Let me say that. I'll show you some. Come on, camera. Come on, internet. Come on, internet.
Come on, connection. Come on, Suze. Keep us connected with communication.
Now, this is published by Blue Angel. The cardstock is pretty thick, and the card size are large. It has each of the runes, but then it also has a card for that rune reversed. So Merkstave is what they're calling it. So here's the Algiz. And, I want to say I can see the purpose of that, and I do. I don't particularly like it. And it's not because I don't read reversals. I do read reversals. But I feel that the way that they paired the interpretations of the reversals with the images, I feel it's just too disjointed. So it doesn't make for a smooth reading experience for me. But I know a lot of people will have great use for that. So that's my about the cards themselves. That's my hesitation about the cards. And you can see I've made notes from the book because there are some interesting things within the book. And she goes deeply into the lore behind the runes. And one of the things I do like is she goes into the language and the pronunciation. So those are things within the book itself that I could find useful for any rune study that I was to do. So that's my take on the first deck. And the second deck that I've been using, that I have been enjoying, is the Runes and Roots Oracle.
Yep.
There it goes.
Woohoo! Yeah. Shiny book, or shiny cover.
Yes, it's very shiny, and that's because, let me show you. on the cards, it might not show it that well on camera, but the runes, this is a bind rune card, but they
Mhm.
actually are kind of like they're gold leafed almost, right? They've got
Mhm.
that. There it goes. You can see the
Yeah.
shine.
Yeah.
So
Like,
that's why that
I
book is so
guess,
shiny.
and I love that you pulled up a bind rune because, something I forgot to say earlier. I mean, we talk about binding runes, and what that means is that you make a new symbol out of two or more runes that has a significance to it. Like on that card, it was kind of like, celebration. Manas is the rune of like the people,
Mhm.
connection, partying. And then the other one, I can't remember which one that was, the other M. But yeah, so you can inscribe that rune on paper or use, the ideas from this deck or on a candle or other, on the ground on your card, so to speak, and have these symbols protect or do the magic of what you ask them to do.
Right.
So,
Right. It's powerful. People
mhm.
who enjoy using sigil magic will find a lot of power in using bind runes, and it doesn't have to just be 2 runes that you combine. You can do as many as you want, which adds an incredible dimension to it. And I think in part because of the ancient roots of the rune system. It carries all forward because even though they may not be our blood relatives, they are still our ancestors.
Mhm.
And that carries a lot of weight into what we do as a practice, whether it's a spiritual practice for meditation, whether it's for connecting with your particular divine pantheon, tapping into something that is that ancient carries a lot of weight from my perspective.
Mhm. And I'd have to agree with that. I mean, a lot of the times when we talk about ancestor work, people like me go, but I'm adopted. And kind of funny enough, I did find through my mother's lineage, that I actually have living family. Uh-oh, we lost Amber. Oh, nope, she's back. But yeah, so we talk about, lineage, but if you think about it, we all came from, somewhere source based. When we talk about source, we talk about like down in Africa or the Egyptian, the deltas back there, because from there, everybody wandered up and around from Pangea into all these other places. Or, there may have been at least, another origin point from here in the North Americas. But we can trace through maternal lineage because, my unknown birth grandma my birth mom, who I actually have a name now, and that, who then gave birth to me, and then I was adopted out. But I can trace that lineage back through them through time immemorial. And that's where, we could all, go back to that time. We could all tap into that primal, symbolism, whether it's the runes or other primordial languages, like the paintings on the cave walls and the pictographs.
Right. And what is that stat now? I'm gonna be off. It's like 4,200,000 people had to come together and
Mhm.
procreate in order for you to be here. So when you think about that amount of ancestry, right? That's a huge team. That's a huge team to walk into any situation with. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I know that that roots or the runes and roots oracle really grabbed your attention because partially the bind runes, but also because of how it allowed you to connect, right?
Well, yes, yes. And for me, work so someone who works with herbs and things to have these, and they make sense because I've seen decks where they'll pair a plant or an herb with something that doesn't quite make sense, or it's a
Hmm.
stretch for those two things to have a correspondence. This deck is spot on for that, and I think a lot has to do with the fact that Nicolette Meal, who's one of the creators of this, is an herbalist. So she has that wonderful knowledge to bring into this set of cards.
Does the guidebook talk about the pairings?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it goes in, it's beautifully done. So here's Elhaz is paired with Angelica, which is associated with the vibrant energy of the sun and the dynamic element of fire, that it's fierce, and it can be protection against all types of threats, and it's a mentor spirit to help you with your boundaries and things, which Elhaz is a rune of protection and of strength, and is a guardian. So they fit together quite well.
I really like that, because again, we can use, or at least if you use that deck, or if you know of good pairings, like that's the thing about Wild Rune Magic. It talks about, she talks about, like herbs as well, and how, since we all come from a colonial background, we're not going to have access to the same materials that they did back then to pair things with. So it's really neat to see how women or other, Nordic folk are exploring and extrapolating from, okay, they have this set of things there. What do we have now? In the same temperature zones, or, across, what is our protection tree versus,
right.
what they had.
And they take in consideration endangered species. So they're like, okay, so you can substitute, this is endangered species, don't be using that in your magic, use this is a perfect substitute. And I have deep appreciation for that. But I know you were using another deck. Which one?
Yeah. So our friends at US Games sent us I think we each got a copy of this, but I decided I was going to use this for today, a Rune Magic Oracle Deck. So this is written by Gialia Monzi and Lorena Assi. And the cards come in a little tuck box, which is really nice, with a little string you can pull. And the book fits right in this little pocket. The reason why there's no book is because it's right here in my hand. So this deck is really interesting. When I picked it up, the image here's the backs first off, because we all like to see a good back. It's got kind of like a pointed star, but it's not the the Vesaver, or like the horn of hell type of symbols that you see usually. But it's got the image and 3 different keywords kind of in the bottom, but it makes sense. Like here's Ingus. And this symbol, by the way, there's 2 different ones depending on who you're learning from. There's this symbol, and then there's another one that's just, I think, the circle part without the expansions. So you'll also find some variety in how things are written. But as I pull some stuff out, and from the back, Algiz. And as you can see, it's colorful, it's bright, but it also has a simplicity to it that kind of draws you in as far as deck works. Like, again, for example, they're also basic tarot size. Like here's my tiny rune deck that I have, which is, both of these only have a quote unquote upright. So if you want to do a shadow side, reading, which you'll learn about in this book, how to read shadow, whether it's an upside down or inverted or flipped over, if you're casting the symbols, on discs, sometimes you'll have them upside down. I tend to ignore those because to me, if they're shadow side down, they're, ignored. But these are really pretty. And the book has some really good information in it. So now these, which is this symbol, you get the meaning, you get an element associated with it, and I like this next kind of point, because a lot of books don't cover it, and it's important to tie back into the ones we have today. They have a gender associated. So I don't know if gender is in everything, but like none of these is feminine and masculine. So some of them are, all encompassing. Some of them are just femme. Some might be even masculine. So here's a femme one, Hinaz. But each rune has a quick correspondences, which to me is kind of like history. Then it has a divinatory meaning. So like, not all runes sets will come with this. They just have like keywords, and then you need to figure out how that relates back to the question, right. Which is why these two books also talk about the knowing. There's the big thing that I pulled out of reading both of these books is they talk about intuition versus this UPG, the unverified person gnosis, versus just knowing, which is like your gut, instinct. Mm-hmm. And to me, there's a difference between gut and intuition and UPG. But, to me, the divinatory meanings is, perfect kind of unverified personal gnosis where, the author, who I'm hoping has read runes for a very long time, is good enough to say, okay, so if you get this in a reading, Kinaz is like energy under control. And then in some cases, like alongside Rado, which is the R, this can indicate a path to follow.
Right.
So there's, other information. And then on the back side of everything, first off, you get a really nice picture of what's on the card. And then it kind of dives into a little bit of what the rune, kind of, again, the lore behind it, and kind of the symbolism on each card, where we have Kinaz represents the sacred flame that brings light and knowledge to it. The king, or in this case, the queen, is the apex of the group. Kinaz is associated with the goddess in the guise of she who gives life and she who gives knowledge. So, in a way, there is a little bit more feminizing, or at least in the runes that are, seen as gender femme, are in here about, that stuff. So I think this is a really nice kind of deck that has a good complement to working with runes as a goddess, even if the meanings in here are more modern or traditional. Right. So yeah, that's the one I've been working with. So go figure. However, in the end of it though, I still like having the symbols, just the symbols. For some reason, for me, it just having like, here's that the one symbol without the X's on it, having the symbol, for me, there's something tangible. There's something that goes back to my linguistics background and writing background that triggers when I see the symbol. It, has power. Words have power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is a book, we can't really even say honorable mention because it's one that neither you and I have gotten our hands on yet, but we want to bring up, and again, it'll be listed in the show notes, is Queering the Runes, Reclaiming Ancestral Wisdom in Rune Magic and Mythology. And that's by Siri Vincent Plouffe. Did you say her last name? I think so.
I think so. Apologies.
Yeah, it's published by Weiser. So if you go into, you can go onto the Weiser website, Queering the Runes, and it'll pop up for you, because that what I think is going to be an interesting approach, because of taking any of that, removing the gender, or how to use the gender within the runes. And I'm interested to read that one for sure.
Yeah, I will say I do own a copy, but again, it's ebook. So there's the cover. It's got a beautiful corvid out there with dangling a couple of runes, which brings us back to the idea of Odin and Odin's two ravens, Hungin and Mungin, who were Memory. Oh my God, Memory, and the other one. I can't remember the other one's name. Sorry, beasts. But yeah, so I love this idea that it's also, queering up or changing the discord between the two, what we, the masculinity version, the patriarchy version that we all know and love, and this new idea of reclaiming back to the feminine or an other perspective. But yeah, I have not read this book yet either. It's queued up, so I will. But yeah, we got some good chat going on. Hi, Dancing Macabre. Nice to see ya. About like getting rune decks and or stone runes. The one set I didn't bring in, and I meant to grab it, was I've done rune decks with polymer clay. So I've done it 2 different ways. One, you have to make it pretty thin. Don't make it too thick because it gets a little weird and tacky. But the first thing you do is you make your sets. I do about 1 inch and make it, kind of rather more thin. And then you can either take a toothpick and inscribe each rune on it while you're thinking about the meaning of it, and then you bake it. And if you want, then you can color it. Traditionally, they used red because sometimes they'd actually imbue, blood into their runes for that additional blood magic connection. And the idea to make it become alive. I love that idea. Unicorn Rocks. Maya says, I'm excited to crochet a rune set too. But yeah, there's this idea that you can make your own runes with, there's wood discs that you can get at various sizes that you can either paint on. You could actually bleed on them if you want, or like use a Sharpie, and because Sharpies now come in every color. When I made my last rune set, I just wrote on it with a Sharpie, on the Fimo. As long as you use like a gray, a white, or a lighter color, you can actually see that. But you can also use like nail polish colors if you want it to kind of stick and, be more present. But yeah, you can make your own rune sets, which is a lot more fun than trying to find an artist for 78 tarot cards. But another thing you can do, like with the different decks, I found that, again, I tend to like smaller cards. And this one is one that I got off of Etsy. I can't remember. The link will be below. But it's got that nice big symbol on it. And then it's got different keywords. But in a way, eventually I might just cut these down and just keep it as a square deck just to have it if I want that. But as you've seen, you can make blank, these are D12s. So you can get 2 of them. And then you can do a normal reading of like past, present, or situation action or situation outcome with these, and have, a throne type. Steve Jackson Games, as I mentioned earlier, does a 24-sided rune. So you can just throw this and get a single rune and then do positions and stuff. There are wood-based runes. That one tends to have the meanings on it for like beginners. But again, these are all interpreted kind of more of our normal understanding. I also have just a metal set that just has, these are just pewter, but they have just the symbol on them. And again, they're tiny. So I don't know how airport friendly they are, but they have the symbol on it. And then most people cast it into like a cup, which one of the runes is supposed to be for that, because I used to use dice and stuff and they would cast things. So I have this little portable flat casting cup that has the again, the Wayfinder symbol in there, and I can just, pull from or drop into, and then that becomes your reading. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this. And yeah, Maya says, I'm excited to crochet a rune set. Yes, you can crochet. You can find cross-stitch patterns. You can find, if you don't have an embroidery machine or a sewing machine or a serger that can, do symbols, you can always, find those patterns and do it. Yes, you can also buy like actual crystal sets. Maya says she has a tiger's eye set and an African bloodstone set. So yeah, runes can be inscribed anywhere. You can even put it on the paint in your walls for protection, in that same color, but because you put the rune on there, it's there. And yeah, there's so many ways and so many different types, as you saw, as I'm throwing everything around now. But the thing about the goddess interpretation and these two books that we've read, and especially the deck that I was using throughout this, is that there's a lot, this ties back more into the earth. So it's more animistic, and it's kind of, again, more, I would say, more generalized pagan friendly. And it just these ideas, and the idea of reclaiming the runes and turning them back into our own self is something, reclaiming, in our belief system is huge right now, and something that is big for me. I'm trying to reclaim birthright. I'm trying to reclaim identity. And just the idea that the runes came from the earth and we can now look at them in this, way is such fun to do. So I guess on behalf of both Amber, who I hope that her internet comes back at some point throughout the day so I can see how she's doing, and myself, thank you all for showing up. Thank you for being open to listening to this idea of goddess runes versus the traditional runes, and the way that the system has been written down from the Eddas, the sagas, and the Havamel, and play with this idea, make it your own. Use your connection to deity or spirit or the universe to see what these beings might have for you. And I'm so glad you all showed up. Awesome. Good. And yes, there are audible versions of this book. The Goddess Casts the Runes is by Destiny Books, so you can find this in the store. Again, the Rune Magic Oracle Deck is from US Games, and it has a nice portable tuck box. And I'm not sure what I know that Norse Goddess Rune Oracle, the one that had the reversals that Amber was using, is also US Games. I'm not sure who did the Rune and Roots Oracle. That is something I will have in the show notes. And I wanted to end on one more thing. Today, when I was shuffling my deck, I pulled Ansus, which has traditional meanings of communication, insight, and wisdom. But when looked through the Goddess Casts the Runes book, this is all about the mouthpiece of the gods. The shape of the rune, a vertical line supporting two shorter downward slants, depicts the open mouth of a divine being speaking the sacred word to the world. And the root of Ansus, which is the AN, originally meant mother goddess. So this is what issues forth from the goddess's mouthpiece, sacred voice. So I hear this and I say, speak your truth into the world. I hear this and I say, boundaries are important. So I think that this being the rune of communication gives us agency, gives us the choice, the ability to put our word out into the world and make it count for something. So I also think this could also, be a good rune for voting, for speaking what you want to see birthed in the world. So until next time, and our next episode, we're going to tell you some of our favorites of this year, decks, books, and others. I guess we'll see you. So thanks again for joining us, everybody, and happy holidays. And let me see if I can end this. Uh-oh, I might not be able to end. That's hilarious.